Arizona Wildlife Views, brought to you by the sale of hunting and fishing licenses and the Heritage Fund, lottery dollars working for wildlife. Some projects made possible by the Sport Fish and Wildlife Restoration Fund.
Welcome to Arizona Wildlife Views. I'm Jim Paxon. Come share a day in the life of an Arizona game ranger and then see the hard-working men and women who enforce the rules of the off-road. Of course, we'll get a great fishing tip from Bass Pro Michael McFarland. But first, let's go on an outdoor adventure with man's best friend.
With the full moon waning, the early morning air is chilled, as only it can be in those last few minutes before dawn, and hunters Andy Knutson and Eric Faulkner hurry to complete the task at hand. With their decoys in place, they silently slip into their layout blinds as they wait to see if they can lure the ducks into this corner of the lake.
Sit.
Tank, Andy's black lab, is anxious to retrieve birds. Very anxious. Anxious to the point where he seems he's about to wriggle out of his own skin. Fortunately, they don't have to wait very long for the first few birds to come into range. And Tank doesn't need to be told what to do.
When Tanky sees the duck go down, it's tough to keep him controlled. He wants to be in the water and on the retrieve and picking up the bird. He's got a real spirit for it and a real passion for getting out there. I started duck hunting when I was 13 years old. It was kind of a family tradition. My father's a duck hunter, his father was a duck hunter, and so we had tons of different area to hunt and opportunities for it, and so he got me into it at an early age. So I guess that means I've been duck hunting for 28 years, 29 years, something like that. Out in Arizona, we've been duck hunting for what, 15 years now, maybe?
15 years, yeah. And we've hit about every water hole, sinkhole, mud hole, lake, pond, all over the state.
Every year, around 6,000 hunters head to the waters of Arizona in pursuit of 20 species of available waterfowl. Duck hunting in Arizona can present some unique challenges, so being flexible in your approach to the sport can be helpful.
We hunt out of a flat bottom boat with a blind on it. We've hunted out of hay bale blinds. We're currently using today layout blinds. They all work pretty good, different applications. You know, layout blinds, it's a little bit more difficult to, shoot ducks sometimes because, you're in it sitting down if you're not used to that. It takes a little bit to get your groove on with it, a little bit of practice. There's not a lot of cover around, a lot of the lakes in Arizona, so you have to kind of improvise. A lot of people like to come out and just jump shoot, but we found the best success to put the decoys out and let the birds work.
As all hunters know, the amount of game you harvest isn't the only measure of a successful hunt. Sometimes just getting away from the stresses of work, the economy, and everything else going on in the world and spending time in the great outdoors is its own reward.
You just sit back at a lake and you just don't think of anything but when the next bird's going to come in. And if it doesn't, you had a great day sitting out at the lake, and a lot of times you see various other species. We've seen bald eagles drop down on the ice and snatch, a dead mallard off the lake. So there's all kinds of things. This particular lake, you see some elk around, you see all kinds of animals, and it's neat to.
Yeah, heard the coyotes calling this morning, and today we had quite the showing of red-tailed hawks that were dancing all over the lake. So
yeah,
it's all that. There's so much that happens around us that we don't get to see because we don't often enough sit still enough just to watch it. And that's one of the beautiful parts about duck hunting is you're sitting still and you're watching nature around you, and you're always amazed at what comes up because you never know what's going to be next.
Of course, don't tell that to Tank. He knows what his job is, and sitting around admiring the natural world in all its glory is not it. While you don't have to have a dog to hunt waterfowl, you can always pick up your downed game from a boat. They certainly add an extra element to the experience.
It's just more fun. It's just fun to watch the excitement of the dog running around, to have that companion. I mean, there's some times where Eric can't go hunting with me, and there's times when I've gone out with just he and Tug, the other dog, and it's just fun. I mean, it's a different level of excitement when the dog's around, because there you can see him. He's game on the entire time. He does not sit down and rest. It's just fun to have that.
When we miss a duck, you'll hear he sits there and whines at us because he knows we missed the duck. And his favorite hobby when we do miss a duck is to go pick up the spent cartridge and bring it back and show us that that's all he had to retrieve.
Yeah.
If you're interested in getting started in duck hunting or taking your game to the next level, there's a lot of information available to help you out.
Best thing you can do is talk to Game and Fish, go to the local Forest Service, pick up some maps and see what's around and start talking to some folks about the different lakes and the different bodies of water that are out there, and then get out and go scout. Go see where the birds are. And one group that we both believe in very strongly is Ducks Unlimited. We're both members of Ducks Unlimited. Eric was a former state or area chairman, and I'm a current area chairman with the Ducks Unlimited chapter. It's an excellent organization to meet like-minded individuals that are involved in the sport and also involved in the conservation end of it, where we can participate in giving back to the sport that we all love so much.
Today, Andy and Eric took canvasbacks, teals, bufflehead, and a ringbill. Even though they didn't make their bag limit, it was enough to make it a successful trip.
Yeah, so we've got a large lake that we're working, and the birds were spending their time on either side of it and not in front of us. So it made it a little bit challenging. There's about 1,000 coot or so on the lake, and they were decoying the ducks right into them. So it made it a little bit more difficult, but enjoyable nonetheless. We still had a decent shoot, picked up a handful of birds, so it was a lot of fun.
I think it's fair to say that Tank had a good time too. Now if they can just find a way to get him a little more excited about being out in the field.
Bring it here, buddy. Here, boy. Good boy, Tanky, good boy. Give it here. Good boy.
The Kaibab Plateau in northern Arizona can be treacherous, rugged, and remote. Still, early visionaries realized that this special place was worth protecting. 13 years before the Grand Canyon received national park status, President Theodore Roosevelt created the Grand Canyon Game Preserve to conserve the unique flora and fauna that live on the plateau, especially the mule deer herd. Over 100 years later, the wildlife in this area is still being protected, now by the Arizona Game and Fish Department and the wildlife manager assigned to the region.
In 1992, when I found out I was coming to the Kaibab, I had been awarded this district. A friend of mine that had went through the academy with me told me I was going to the jewel of Arizona. And every time I go to work, I think about that statement that he made and just how accurate it was. I think the Kaibab's an incredibly special place. As a result, I've been here since I started, over 19 years now, with no plans to leave or go anywhere else.
Game management in Arizona is a big job, and the men and women who take on that responsibility cover a lot of big territory within management units all across the state. The Kaibab Plateau is in Unit 12A and covers over 1,200 square miles north of the Grand Canyon, with elevations ranging from 5,000 to 9,200 feet. It has very few facilities, and the closest town is in southern Utah. But being assigned here does have its perks.
Yeah, I get to go to lunch on the edge of the Grand Canyon when I feel like it. The neat part is I typically have it all to myself. I'll drive out to one of those points and have lunch for a half hour, 45 minutes, and just soak in the splendor of northern Arizona. And it's really hard to beat.
While this area is beautiful, it is also home to some of the largest mule deer in the country. And hunters who are lucky enough to draw a tag for this unit usually don't go home disappointed. The job of managing this huge tract of land with its wide variety of species and habitat can be a challenge.
Well, the Kaibab's an interesting district for a wildlife manager in that it has a lot of notoriety associated with its deer herd. And as a result, a lot of the things that I do, other wildlife managers in the state don't do. We do a lot of habitat work up here for the deer herd. We're doing constant studies. A research branch of the Arizona Game and Fish Department's up here looking at habitat quality and forage availability. We're catching deer every spring and looking at their health coming out of the winter. We've got the check station where every deer hunter on the Kaibab has to check out when they harvest a deer. And so there's a lot of things going on in the Kaibab that don't happen in the rest of the state. Well, the deer capture presents a pretty neat opportunity for somebody that's interested in wildlife and wildlife work, and that it's hands-on work. You're actually handling the animals, which really is a rare thing in this day and age. I think people often assume we're hands-on with the critters in the hills all the time, but we're really not. We observe them constantly, but actually hands-on work where we're handling the animals and taking measurements and things of that nature is really relatively rare occurrence.
The back teeth are all white right now.
Wildlife managers are considered the face of Arizona Game and Fish because they interact with the public more than most employees have the opportunity to. On this day, Todd is patrolling during a Miriam's turkey hunt, where he gets to know the hunters in the field, something he obviously enjoys.
One of the interesting things in Arizona is that most of the hunting public and most of the public in general that we contact are really happy to see us. I think a lot of states, game wardens aren't really looked upon as favorably as they are in the state of Arizona. And I think that has something to do with the fact that our people have some life experience, they've gone to college, as a result they're a little bit older, and they interact with people a little bit better. But it's really heartwarming to see people smile when you pull up their camp and invite you into camp. I regularly get offered cups of coffee, I regularly get offered meals. People want to spend time with us. And I think that's because we know a little bit about wildlife and wildlife habitat, and we can talk to them and help them do what they're doing. And as a result, the support by the Arizona public for us in the field is really, I think, probably unparalleled in North America.
While wildlife managers in Arizona are commissioned law enforcement officers, they're also required to hold a college degree in a wildlife science or closely related field. This allows them to not only enforce the law and assist the public, but to develop and create habitat improvement programs specific to their management areas.
Well, in 1996 we had an incredibly large fire on the west side of the plateau in the mule deer winter range. It burned up about 56,000 acres. And the year following that, it occurred to me that it might be an important thing to start looking at efforts to rehabilitate some of that burned range and try to get some forage species back on the ground, food for deer, and try to restore some of the wildlife habitat that had been lost in that fire. And of course, Mother Nature will do that on her own, but we as humans are a little more impatient, and we'd like things to happen a little faster. And so in '97, I sat down and I mapped out about 25,000 acres of various habitat treatments. Things like seeding in places that had burned pretty severely. I also looked at some areas where things hadn't burned, where we had really thick stands of pinyon juniper trees that were kind of choking out the vegetation underneath them, and going in and removing some of that overstory to release those plants and give them a chance to thrive. And also looked at some of the old habitat treatments that had been done historically, primarily for cows, but had turned into really, really good winter mule deer range. And we went back into several of those and restored them to the condition they were in the 50s. As part of that plan, we also we've built so far 8 new waters, and we have 5 more new ones to put in. And so we're looking at 13 new water sources on the west side of the Kaibab for wildlife. Really good water distribution, almost ideal. And so I think some of the things that we've accomplished in the last decade have really, really been productive.
Maintaining those water sites is also part of Todd's job, but it's just one of 100 things he does each year to make sure the wildlife in the Kaibab will be here for a long time to come.
And I take personal pride in the fact that some of the things that we're accomplishing on the Kaibab are going to be left. It may sound corny, but I think of them as a sort of legacy, something that 50 years from now my grandkids could come back and say, you know, my granddad, he did that. and it's here for us now. And I think that is something that not many people get to accomplish in their careers in America anymore. And I think having that legacy is an incredibly important thing to me.
The job of a wildlife manager in Arizona is a unique one, and not for everybody. But after 20 years in the field, it is still the perfect job for Todd.
Well, I think the wildlife manager's job in the state of Arizona is probably the best job in the world. It's an incredibly diverse job. Many people aren't aware that a large portion of our job is not law enforcement. Most people immediately assume that what we do is primarily law enforcement. And really that only constitutes about half of our duties. We get to survey wildlife populations, we develop hunt recommendations that result in the permit levels for hunt tags that people apply for. One day you may be sitting in the office working on paperwork, and the very next day you're in a helicopter flying over the Grand Canyon looking at desert bighorn sheep. It's really, really a dream job. I regularly tell people that no hick kid from northern Michigan should have ever expected to get to do this for a living. And I believe that.
This group of Arizona Game and Fish law enforcement officers are getting ready to saddle up and hit the dusty trail. But instead of horses, they're riding something with just a little more horsepower. These officers are taking part in a special saturation patrol to help ensure that off-highway vehicle users follow and understand that there are some rules to the off-road. That's part of that program that went into place the 1st of January 2009 to help better manage off-highway vehicle use in the state. In the last 12 years, off-highway vehicle use has seen an increase of 347%, and we need some way to help manage that. The huge growth in off-highway vehicle, or OHV, use in Arizona has outpaced the existing funding to manage that growth, protect wildlife habitat, and help maintain recreational access. So in 2009, a new state law went into effect that requires the annual purchase of a $25 decal for vehicles that are designed primarily for use over unimproved terrain and weigh 1,800 pounds or less.
These bikes were designed to ride off-road, so by law you have to have the OHV decal.
That $25 decal that we've talked about, the money that comes into the program gets separated out into 3 organizations. 60% of the money goes to the State Parks Department, 35% comes to the Game and Fish Department, and 5% goes to State Land Department. The 60% is used mainly for a grant program to help increase riding areas, to help fix up and clean up riding areas, as well as to do other various things that have an off-highway vehicle focus to them. The 35% that comes to the Game and Fish Department, of that, most of the money is used to get law enforcement officers on the ground. They spend most of their time riding in an off-highway vehicle or on an ATV, and they're out there interacting with the public, making sure that people are doing the right thing, and unfortunately sometimes that part of education is that someone gets cited for doing something improperly. But most of the time they're just talking to people and educating them about the laws and about doing things safely. Today, officers are in the area of Cow Creek Road on the back way to Crown King, a popular and challenging off-roading area. They're talking with riders to help keep them safe and legal.
I'd be out here with, making my clothes into a tent. I've been out here for like 20 minutes. I'm trying to catch game. I'm a city boy. I don't have any clue what I'm doing out here.
The worst one I saw was I had a lady about 6 months ago that was riding a ATC, a 3-wheel Honda, on Castle Hot Springs Road, and she had her 6-month-old daughter straddling the tank and cruising down the road. Most of the violations that I see are usually just the no decals.
Most of the riders the officers encounter today are just out enjoying the great outdoors and seem to appreciate the officers' presence. They understand they have a job to do, and even the few who are cited for a violation don't get too upset.
Always have a good one up there. Just appreciate you being so cool about it. There's some snow up there, so.
There are so many different types of vehicles that people use for off-roading that nothing should surprise the patrol officers. But I don't think even they expected to see these coming down the road. One of the biggest concerns with the huge increase in OHV riders is to make sure they stay on approved roads and trails and not create what we call wildcat trails that can destroy native habitat and foul streams. Contrary to popular belief, you can't just ride anywhere on one of these in the state of Arizona. There are approved riding areas across the state, more than 35 of them. You can find them on the Game and Fish website or on our handout pamphlet, OHV Laws and Places to Ride. Making sure that there are plenty of legal places to ride and that access remains open on public lands is the main focus of the decal program. Revenues generated from the new OHV decal will be used to help ensure sustainable opportunities and natural resource protection by increasing funding and grant programs that pay for trail maintenance, signage, maps, facility development, habitat damage mitigation, as well as education and enforcement. Some people would look at the desert and say this is pretty barren and that there isn't really anything out there, but actually this is habitat to a lot of different animals. Javelina live in this, jackrabbits live in this, and that's their habitat. And the reason we don't want people just driving anywhere is because of that habitat damage. I always like to say you wouldn't want somebody to drive one of these through your front living room, so why drive through their living room? Kind of want to make sure that we're taking care of the land out there and really making sure that that habitat is available to everyone. And whether it's desert, whether it's pine forest, no matter where you're riding, that is habitat for some type of wildlife out there. So we always want to leave it better than we found it. As always, Game and Fish always promotes stay on the roads and trails when you're out riding. If you are one of the many newcomers to off-roading, remember that safety comes first. It is recommended that you take a training class on how to operate your vehicle and be aware of local laws and legal places to ride. One of the first things you want to think about when riding an ATV or an OHV, an off-highway vehicle, is making sure you have the proper safety gear. If you're riding on an ATV or on a dirt bike, you always want to make sure that you wear a helmet, you want to wear eye protection, you want to wear gloves on your hands, and boots that cover your ankles. Riding off-road is a great way to get out of town and into the outdoors, and our website will give you plenty of information on how to make it a fun, legal, and safe experience. I love getting out and riding. You get to be outside, you get to enjoy the beautiful weather that we have in Arizona. And Arizona is one of those great states where if it's really hot down in Phoenix, you can go up to the Flagstaff area and you can still ride. And when it's really cold and snowy up there, you can come down to the Phoenix area and ride. We have a beautiful state, there's all kinds of things to see. And you know, when you're out on one of these, you get to go to some of those areas that you wouldn't necessarily see if you were just on the highway or zipping by on the freeway. And it's just fun. Some of it's just basic recreation. I just have a good time when I'm out riding around.
I'd like to teach you something today that most people get confused in what they're actually doing. It's called pitching or flipping. Pitching is actually kind of an underhand cast. You're really not flipping. It's more common in Arizona to be pitching. Pitching is when I take the bait in my hand and I'm really not holding the bait, I'm just resting the bait. And it's kind of a pendulum action, honestly. If it swings forward, it swings back. When I basically let go of the bait, as it begins to swing forward, okay, I drop the tip and pitch it. So I drop and pitch. Okay, and that's more commonly used in Arizona than anything. You pitch to trees, you pitch to cuts. For example, this little tree right up front here, it's probably about 20 feet in front of me. I can take the bait in my hand and I can pitch up near that bush up there and keep some distance between myself. Now the difference in flipping is that you simply take the bait and you want the bait to be about the length of the rod. Then you're going to take the line out in your fingers like this. So, okay, at this point you engage the reel, and you're not going to reel this up any longer. You're going to control it with your arm, back and forth. And now you're going to get up close and personal with these bushes and trees, and it allows you to actually get it inside the bushes and do multiple flips to the little pockets where you're trying to put the bait. You can do them very fast. So in other words, I could go around this little bush here and I can put 4, 5, 6 flips without having to reel the line back up in. And so it allows me to cover very thoroughly inside of the tree by flipping. In Arizona, you know, flipping is definitely a use. It's a great way to fish.
Well, that's our show for this week. For more information on Arizona game and fish or anything you've seen tonight, check our web. I'm Jim Paxon with producers Gary Schaefer and Carol Lynn. We'll see you next week.